All right, we should be live. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here today for another exciting conversation as we dive into all things. And I'm really excited about this topic today because, as some of you are aware, I just recently completed a 6-day dry fast, which is abstaining completely from food and water for the entire duration, which was extremely challenging in a lot of ways, but also very rewarding in so many ways. And I'm really excited to jump into this conversation because one of my main inspirations for going this long in what might seem like a very crazy venture is this man sitting right here, fasting with Trevor. So, Trevor, I'm really excited to jump into this conversation today and just really appreciate you being here. So, with
Yeah,
that, yeah, I would just like to give a big welcome. And if you could share a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got into this seemingly crazy practice of dry fasting.
yeah, it's been quite a journey and awesome job doing the 6 days. That's never easy. Some people can't even fathom doing 24 hours, let alone understanding being without the water and the food. But yeah, that's kind of where everyone eventually kind of comes into terms with like some kind of sickness that's not, they can't shake, and they've had it for a few months, then a year. Like, why am I lazy? Why am I kind of have chronic fatigue syndrome? So I kind of got inundated with a few different infections. One was like a fungal infection in my blood. I would get eczema, and I would have brain fog, and I had like a jaw infection. I had fatty liver. All these things I just got inundated with. So my immune system just got shot. And I was just kind of like living my life, enjoying it. Trader in Chicago, making a good bit of money and traveling the world. Life couldn't get better. And so little did I know I was gonna be kind of hit in the face with a whole bunch of health issues. And obviously health is greater than wealth. So I just started researching. How do I rectify these things? Because antibiotics and medicine weren't working. Um, and so eventually I found that what's the most hardcore thing I can do? It's fasting. It's the most systemic. It's addressing every single thing from head to toe, not just topically. And eventually, I was able to gradually lower the viral loads that I was targeting because I've always conceptualized these illnesses with parasites, and I still do think everything is parasites. And when I have clients, it's pretty much a matter of me convincing them, here's the riddle. You haven't figured it out yet, and this is how the parasite is working, and now let's address it. Um, so eventually, I just kept kind of just going down that rabbit hole and thinking of like, what's possible? Am I going to die? Is this kind of like a little too crazy? Have I lost my mind? And eventually, I read enough literature to know that people in Russia were doing it out there, at least 5, 6 days. And I was like, I feel good on day 5, day 6, even though they tell you you die at 3 days. You definitely know by this point, that's just the transition into ketosis. So it is a transition. It's just not the transition to death. And so I was like, how much can my body handle? And I realized that this makes a lot of sense. It's actually downsizing like a corporation, getting rid of the employees that are not doing work or parasitic, just leeching off of a salary, but not, doing any work. Those are the parasites. So then my body was like, we need to downsize. And so I downsized enough to, get my body back and repossess my body from what I once knew. And just to kind of wrap it up, I feel like some people come into the world, they just never know what a normal, natural, pure body is like. They came into it with parasites, and they're like, that's just who I am. I didn't, so I knew that that wasn't normal. So therefore, I'm going to seek that again because I can't. I want to seek purity, essentially. And there is a point to do, there is a point when you achieve it, but a lot of people never achieve it with fasting because they never go to the point where it's re-achieving the default setting, version 1.0. They just kind of exacerbate the parasites and just mess up all the, these hiding spots, parasites in remission, and then all of a sudden they have to reorganize homeostasis, and then they're like, fasting sucks, but it's really that they just didn't go far enough. They just ruffled up the feathers.
Right. Yeah, that's fascinating. And it would be a good point to just insert the standard disclaimer that nothing we're talking about is intended to be medical advice.
uh,
This is all just based on our personal experience and what we've researched and gone through. So please don't try this at home without consulting with a medical practitioner or whatever.
yeah,
Just to get that out of the way. But do want to say that, yeah, I find that analogy very fascinating. And one thing that I've, I really enjoy visualizing is this analogy of a dirty pool. So like our body is mostly water. We've got dirt, toxins, parasites, accumulation, all of these different spaces. So a lot of the cleansing protocols out there are all about flushing the toxins away, which can be helpful. You know, going on a long water fast, drinking water rich, eating water rich foods can be helpful in flushing those kind of things. But what is so much more effective in cleaning a dirty pool than draining it completely and then filling it back up with clean water? Of course, you can add water into a dirty pool and it's going to slowly sift away, but why not drain it completely? And that's what really attracted me about dry fasting, because it is a very extreme practice, and it doesn't come without risk, you know, and I want to make sure that that's extremely clear. It's not something that somebody can just dive into. And a lot of the misconceptions around the particular number of days that you can survive without water and all of that are based in reality to some degree, because if somebody's coming from a toxic environment and their body's loaded with this crap, if they go too much too fast, it can be quite dangerous. And so I do want to make that point very clear, that I'm not advocating for anyone to jump into this very quickly. And that's why I wanted to hear from you, and I'd be curious. So what was kind of your timeline on getting into fasting? Like your experiences, how did you kind of incrementally step into that practice once you kind of discovered that was the path that you wanted to go?
Um, since I didn't find a remedy with pharmaceutical medication, they had nothing for me. It was all a matter of me like seeking different homeopathic remedies and experiencing different levels of hope. And when I saw that my symptoms were being cured, for lack of a better word, with a shorter fast, I was like, oh, this is giving me, increasing levels of hope that this is the thing, that's going to work. And I was like, I couldn't think of a more hardcore thing to do. So I was obviously doing like the water fasting and thinking that that was kind of like, I couldn't even imagine dry fasting, never even heard of it. And so I would just do 3 day water fasts with like one meal, and then do another 3 day water fast with one meal, just constantly doing buffets, essentially, thinking that there's an exponential effect of detox where I'm going to utilize autophagy. It was uncharted territory, so I didn't know how much time would be required. But it could be months, it could be a year, kind of like the same logic that people have when they're on extreme diets. It's just like eventually, over the course of a couple of years, I'm gonna cure this thing. And then eventually, I realized that there were some crazy Russians doing this kind of thing, and I I kind of heard it's always kind of like these stories I'd hear through the grapevine. Like this one woman cured Hashimoto's with like 2 consecutive 8 day dry fasts, with 1 hour in between. And I was like, I would automatically associate that with like, that's my thing. I got to do that. And that was like the longest amount of time that I heard of someone doing. And so I did that. I just did like, actually I did like 6.5 days and I did 9 days. And I experienced something that I haven't experienced before because I was doing every single thing under the sun with detox, like ozone therapy, antibiotics, like hardcore diets, the oregano oil, every single like drinking hydrogen peroxide, like crazy things. Um, and then I was experiencing such deep levels of detox when I did that. It was like exponential autophagy from pairing those two fasts that I was like, oh my gosh, I'm actually rashing out in the areas that I've been targeting for all these years. And I've never experienced that before. So I was experiencing years worth of detox within a short time frame. And then the next thing that appeared to me was like, how many days is required? you know. And so that's something I had to figure out. And it was always, the word in my head was always farther, farther. And I was like, oh gosh, either this is the devil or God talking to me. Either I'm going to die or I'm going to get the cure. So I it came down to the psychological like test of like trusting myself and trusting my heart and trusting my body. Like I'm not going to die. I gotta push on to another day. And that's where the danger comes into effect because you can oftentimes do this in like a unfavorable setting and not prepare well, and you can put yourself into a predicament, especially if you're approaching this scenario with a toxic body already, because then you have too much going on in the circulatory system and you start fainting and it's just like, and then if you're in a dry environment, it's just, you got to intelligently go about this process. And at first, I was very unintelligently going about this process.
Yeah, thanks for that. And it is something that yeah, it does seem to be very helpful. And that's why I'm grateful for someone like yourself to kind of pioneer into that space to make those kind of mistakes so that we
Yeah,
can
I
all
know,
learn
right?
from it. So I really appreciate that. So what would you say were kind of like, if you could go back to the very beginning and tell yourself, some of the biggest tips so you could avoid some of those pitfalls and mistakes, what would be some big tips that you'd give or maybe could suggest to somebody starting out in this space?
It's a good question. Oftentimes, people find dry fasting when they're already detoxing from a diet, like using a diet, and they're already kind of frail and almost like a skeleton. And they start from the perfectly wrong place, which is emaciated, mineral deficient, skinny, and now they're putting themselves into a dangerous situation. So obviously, like your fat is your insurance policy. So like you are going deeper into the fast and your body's utilizing the fat, so that as fuel, that's your body. If you look at your body as a survival vessel, it kind of changes the perspective of how the body works. When you're doing very well at surviving, then your body can focus on beauty and you have luscious, long, beautiful hair like you have. It's like now we're mineral sufficient and we're good. But but I would say like to clean the intestines was something I overlooked because even Jesus Christ was doing that. There's, literature on that where who cares about the word fasting? It's all about getting to an intestinally clean state and staying in that state as long as possible until the body has found homeostasis, like a rebalancing. And then I would say loading up on like electrolytes beforehand because it stores in your tissues and your body can utilize that to distribute your cells across the body when you're starving.
Mm.
So, the oxygen can get to the brain and the body's not in a state of panic. Thirdly, is nose breathing, like literally taping your mouth shut when you're sleeping. Like nose breathing is very humidifies through your nose. It's not as drying, and you're getting oxygen straight to the head. Instead of it going to the lungs and then the head. Straight shot. And then lastly, I would say is like owning the fast. So like accepting that you're fasting. If you're in a panic state, your cells are in a panic state. Actually, the last thing is being in a setting that is humidifying enough for your body to use the air as enough hydration for your circulation to keep flowing. Because you're going to have so much mucus and like protein dumping into the blood, especially fat, that sometimes it can be too much for the body to process. And the slight humidification from the air can kind of give it just enough lubrication for your body to get the benefits of dry fasting, but also circulation is optimal. And therefore, it's just a matter of how many days you stack at that point, because a skinny person and a fat person will just achieve the same level of detox at the same day. So day 11, the skinny person and the fat person both achieve the same level of detox with regards to curing parasites. It doesn't matter if you're too skinny. So the fat is just an insurance policy, like I said.
Yeah, that makes sense because it's like the more that we can outlive these little buggers, the better. So we have to have our reserves ready to go so that we can outlive them essentially.
And you
Because
and you're doing it for spiritual reasons, like because you look and seem healthy.
thanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was mostly for spiritual reasons. I mean, I like having a yearly extended fast just to kind of do a good reset anyway. And during this time of year is my favorite time to do it because it's right at the seasonal shift and it represents kind of like, and we'll talk more about this, but that how I titled the show, the Solve et Coagula, the dissolve and reform, death and rebirth, because we're coming out of winter, which signifies the death in our cyclical yearly cycle, and then we come into spring, which is new life. So if we can match that as above, so below, it's all connected. So if we can sort of match these natural rhythms of creation, then it helps to enhance that as well, so that I can start my true new year, even though we call New Year's in January. It's, in my opinion, really this time of year. So we start this new year in a fresh way. So yeah, that was my biggest inspiration for starting that during this time.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and I know you just recently did you made it to 18 days this time around. Is it something where do you have a particular time? I mean, I know a big factors are weather, temperature, climate and all of that kind of stuff. So do you usually find that this time of year is most advantageous to doing something like that, or does it sort of shift?
I think so. Oftentimes people ask two questions. One is like, what do you do on your fast? And secondly, it's how do I go to sleep? Because their cortisol's pumping and they're just like, they just can't sleep and they will break the fast because of that. I find it's very easy to sleep and it's very good for your nervous system to have cool temperatures where
Mm.
you can kind of, the air feels more hydrating and it just calms the body down because your body's trying to assist in the detox by heating up and having hyperthermia. So it cools the body down and then nose breathing. So you're getting the oxygen, you're getting the cool environment, and it's just way easier to fast, I feel like. So if I were to fast in like the desert, I probably would get, I would accomplish probably 11 to 12 days and it wouldn't be able to go farther, I don't think.
Right.
I was trying to go to 21 days. Every time I try to go to 21 days, not, it's not health advice, but that's where I know that that's the full, default setting is achieved. Like you full reset is really like 21 days, which is ironically a deviation of 7, which is big in the scriptures. Um, but yeah, that's what I was shooting for. But ironically, the climate dipped off on day 17 and a
Mm.
half. And I was kind of like knowing that was coming. I was like, okay, you just got to buckle down, Trevor. Like, but because the humidity was going right down,
Mm.
through the floor, and you just you feel it. You feel like okay, now it's hard. And so it was middle of the night, and I was like, psychologically, I was just kind of done, and so I just broke it. I still had a great fun time. It was it's hard to imagine having a fun time on a fast, but like my body has normalized it. It's not as much suffering as it used to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I could imagine that would get, I mean, just in my experience going to where I've gone, every time I do a fast, it does seem to get a little bit easier. Of course, then you push it to the limit, and that's why I'm helpful for having a guide like yourself who's got very clear indicators of like, okay, it's time
Yeah.
to break the fast, because that's really important too. So maybe, and if someone's curious on a more practical step-by-step guide, I did do a show not too long ago using a lot of advice from Trevor, and I did put the link in the description. So if you want to kind of go through it pragmatically on how to prepare for and get into it, we'll be touching on a lot of that here, but we won't be going step by step. So you can find that linked in the description. But on those factors of kind of like cues when to break a fast, I think it'd be good just to go over those just for anyone curious. So what would be the biggest indicators to that it's time to break the fast?
Yeah, one of the things that's kind of ironic for people to understand is like, how does your kidney filter, during the fast when there's no hydration, lubrication coming in? Ironically, you can cure kidney illness with dry fasting, but you got to have to tiptoe into it. You just start with a smaller fast and then do a little bit longer, and eventually you decalcify any kidney sediment, kidney stones. I certainly had them when I first started. So that can be too much for you to kind of embark on. So sometimes the kidneys can get sensitive and a little hot and swollen. It's very rare, happens to like 5% of people. But it's time to break the fast. And I think to break the fast on like with a little bit of baking soda, which is something your body naturally produces. It's not like unnatural, but it disintegrates and alkalizes the kidneys. And then you jump into it again and you're going to be good. I don't have any problems with it anymore, but in the first, couple of fasts I did. Another few reasons to break the fast is like if you didn't intestinally cleanse well enough, you're going to start vomiting, and because your body wants to get rid of it because it realizes it's healing, and it's time to discard anything that's going to prevent healing. So you're obviously not passing bowel movements, so the only exit pathway is your mouth. So, and it's not just one time you're going to throw up; it'll be like 8 to 9 times. So the acidity, it's just time to break the fast. So sensitive kidneys, vomiting because of nausea. Thirdly is like fainting. If you're kind of like passing out and fainting, that means that your body is too thick and there's not enough potassium. Maybe getting to a more humid environment or preparing a little bit better. And then lastly, I think that if if you are you're limited in movement, so if you just aren't able to move at all, that's another sign that your blood isn't pumping, as effectively, and it's also time to break the fast, because if you can't move, that means that there's no movement, circulation in the body. So if you are, if you're very efficient in movement, that means that your circulation is very, optimal. So the opposite is also true. So the next step is blood clotting, and that's an unsafe territory you're going into. So that's why it's always good to kind of test it. When I'm deep into the fast, like day 13, day 14, I'll get up and like walk around and maybe walk to do a short little, hike, or like, I don't know, walk like 500 feet. And then I see like where I'm at. Because sometimes psychologically you can think that you can't accomplish that. You better stay down, lay down and not really do much. But that's not the truth. You kind of want to, get up and get the engine moving a little bit to see where you're at. Because
Yeah.
sometimes, yeah,
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I would say sometimes you can, you, just because the full body reset happens at day 21 doesn't mean that you're entitled to get there, because you're limited by your toxicity. So your toxicity could limit you to like 12 to 13 days, and therefore that's the dead end. It's unsafe to go farther than that. And that because you're like, I can't even get up, like this is unsafe. And then breaking the fast is a whole nother journey after that, depending on what you're discarding.
Right. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I'd say I reached my limit. And if that's true, it's only about 5% of the population. I'm there with the kidney pain because I did start to develop that towards the end of that 6 days, and that kidney pain actually it sustained for a good 4 or 5 days into the refeed as well. So I was doing periodic baking soda or an alkalizing agent to help, and that was immediate relief whenever I would do that. And I would also take, I started taking Chanca Piedra tea as well to kind of help loosen things up if there were any
Mm.
issues with kidney stones or anything like that. And then I was also doing castor oil packs after that point as well, just to kind of help stabilize anything. It wasn't any cause for concern, but it was kind of a bit annoying. So it was something I wanted to ask you about if you've experienced someone who's had that for sustained for a few days after it's gone away since then, which I'm grateful for. But just curious your thoughts on that aspect.
Yes. I mean, I've had a lot of times to speculate different theories behind it. Oftentimes, like you've had a whole life of accumulating like different fats and proteins. Sometimes the proteins, everything's pretty much protein at the end of the day. So if you have like a mole is even protein. So when your skin is detoxifying and clearing and purifying, that all gets dumped into the circulatory system, and then your kidneys are responsible for filtering that out. So there could be like a kinking process with all like the traffic jam of protein essentially, and it's just waiting for your kidney to filter through it all. So when you haven't done that before, it's just kind of filtering through new proteins. It's just overwhelmed. Sometimes it could be like an abundance of fats and proteins, but that's why I also like to breathe properly and get some deep breaths, because your lungs are also possibly equally as effective as your kidneys are with filtering your blood, I think. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense, and kind of leads into another question related to breathing and that pathway of elimination and how important that is during a dry fast. So, what would be what would be some of your favorite breathing exercises that you do when you're going deep into a dry fast?
I mean, I kind of like simple answers, and I want to say like, oh, I'm doing like box breathing mixed with like, like just crazy yoga type stuff. But um, but in reality, like being gentle with your body is the whole name of the game with fasting. And so I do like, once you've psychologically owned the fast, then you can like let your shoulders down and like relax, and you're not gonna die. These fear constructs are gonna keep being presented to you. So I really just like elongated exhales, and it's always through the nose. At least I'm doing that. And if I have a headache in my left side of my brain, then I'll do the box breathing, which is closing my right nostril and like localizing my oxygen to the left side by doing 4 seconds in and then 4 seconds out, and then I do the change the nostril. So headache goes away in like 3 or 4 seconds,
Hmm.
and therefore it's getting saturation of oxygen. And then if I have like just a little bit of I'm feeling something in my heart, usually I'll do like some push-ups, maybe 10 push-ups, because it's kind of flushing my lymph, but also saturating, it's kind of pushing my circulation a little bit faster, so it's unkinking that clotting that might be occurring so that I can use it as energy, because sometimes it's just fat. And then I'll do like kind of quick breaths, but not many, not much of them. I'll do like, and that'll kind of like um, just push my blood through my circulation, circulatory system so that I can unkink the hose, so to speak.
Nice. Yeah, those are helpful tips. I found yeah, I found just the deep breathing, just very simple deep breathing. And as you mentioned, the long exhalation was very helpful. And you've talked a lot about the importance of being outside and sort of that humid, fresh air. And that was such a, I mean, night and day difference. Of course,
Mhm.
I love to rest and be in the bed and be still for a period of time, but then going outside and laying on the bare ground and all of that was just very magical. So,
It really teaches you to be, that's what fasting really does at the end of the day. We become so materialistic and indoctrined to like how the matrix is that when you fast, you become your natural self, like your true self. So your natural self wants to be naked and outside, essentially. You feel so much better and you're able to kind of, experience the elements. And it's just your body's drinking through the skin, essentially.
mm.
It just blatantly feels better.
Yeah, and with that, your body's drinking through the skin and through the lungs. M- My thoughts on that, or are when you're doing something like that, when you're taking in water that way on a dry fast, the parasites aren't really going to have time to utilize that water. Your body's going to be very efficient with bringing that in and bringing that where it needs to go without sort of parasite access to it. Is that why you think, like, what do you think about that as far as, why? Because some people might be like, oh, if you're in a humid environment, you're breaking the dry fast, you're drinking water through your lungs or all of that. So you're not getting the same benefits. So what
Mm.
do you think about all that?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's, it's a very complicated topic that I don't think has really ever been addressed in any scientific articles, because no one's actually doing this crazy thing, But in my opinion, like there's something different that happens when it's digested liquids versus fluid that you're breathing in through the lungs. But it still keeps the autophagy and the dry fasting intact. So it takes 2.5 ounces of water for your digestion to be activated. And once that's happening, it gets dispersed systemically, and then therefore the parasites. One of the parasites can be lubricated enough to evade the immune system, essentially. So that's why water fasting takes 3 to 4 times as much time to heal the same thing, is because you're just kind of creating a worse environment to chase down the pathogens when they've already been. Most pathogens exist in liquid form. Well, they rob you of your liquids, and then they're evading your immune system by keeping that lubrication. The lubrication gets dried out with the dry fast. And so just like I like to use this analogy as your snot, which everyone kind of blows their nose every now and then. Sometimes it can be very solid. Sometimes it can be very, lubricated where it's very flimsy. That's the same thing that happens within the body and your lymphatic system. So the dry fasting mechanism is going to dry out that mucus so that it turns into a solid protein. And then your body can actually use that mucus as energy, when a water fast is not ever allowing that. Um, so it's a hard question to answer, but I think that it's as long as you're not like taking showers and submerging yourself into the ocean, because you're still killing the parasites, but you're kind of keeping it alive for another 24 hours every time you do that. It's just too much. If you want to heal something, don't let water kind of touch it, essentially, because you're kind of drying it out. Essentially, that's kind of what happens.
Right. Yeah, and in my experience, it might be tempting to swish water in your mouth to kind of relieve that dry feeling, but that actually makes the thirst much worse when you do things like that because it like triggers your body that, oh, we have access to water now, go seek it, like get it.
Yeah.
But so I don't suggest doing that either. Yeah, cool. And then as far as uh, you know, naysayers to dry fasting, people who claim that you're going to be putting yourself at much risk, you're damaging your kidneys, and all the things that people say to where they're like, "Don't dry fast. This isn't something." What would you say in your experience to that, just in general? If you have any thoughts, if not, no worries.
I'm at this point, I'm so certain that dry fasting is the way. If someone can introduce something better to me, I will take it and I will say that that is the better option. But I'd say that you're you detox as deep as you understand how to, is what I like to say. You detox as deep as you understand how to. So that means that if you only understand fasting up to day 2 or day 3, that's, it's dangerous after that point. That's what you're going to accomplish. But if you understand how the body is working and exactly the processes that are occurring during the fast, you're like, oh, my body's heating up because I do have that parasitic infection behind the neck, or like my ears are stinging. I'm having my tinnitus is coming up and my ears are red. Like, sure enough, there's a parasitic infection. But some people will break their fast because of these obstacles. Certainly, doctors will tell you to not do it, or they don't like when anybody feels pain or suffering because that's kind of a detox symptom. I don't want you experiencing pain. Here's a pill. With fasting, give me the pain, give me the suffering, because that means that I'm like, construction is underway. Um, and so for me, I mean, dry fasting requires patience, but I don't have enough time to wait 70 to 80 days to rectify something in a water fast. It's just too much time. My family's worried about me. I got to work. Like, what am I doing out in the middle of nowhere? Just having, it's like dry fasting is like, you know, 15 days or 21 days. Sometimes it only requires 11 days, but 11-day dry fast would equate to like 40 days on water. So with the naysayers, they're usually people who haven't partook in dry fasting and they're kind of dogmatic in one way. I'm somebody who's done water fasting and dry fasting. So like I'm coming from a standpoint of experience that, if someone has done both, then I'll be like, okay, I understand your opinion. Like, what do you have to offer? But oftentimes it's someone who also hasn't dry fasted long enough or still is, dealing with issues, or they have somebody that sold them a product, or that, for instance, like water fasting retreats. Here, come to my facility, pay me $8,000. I'm going to supervise you while you do a 21-day water fast. I promise you, you'll get cured. Oh, you didn't get cured. Come back again. You need to do it twice. Give me another 8 grand. And I'm someone explaining to them like 21 days is nothing. You're not going to get a pink tongue at all. You just gave them like free money back to back to back, all because they convinced you that dry fasting is dangerous and not to be had. But if you think about, not to digress, but like if you think about like the beginning of time, the beginning of human existence on Earth, it's pretty hardcore. There's some rusty, like hardcore things that humans are doing. They're not always finding food. Dry fasting is pretty normal back then. But since we're in an age where fast food is so prevalent and there's always food is ubiquitous. But like back then, it's pretty much commonplace. Fasting is very normalized. But it's just so far-fetched now. We just lost grasp of true healing. And it's obviously the most simple version of it, which is do nothing and heal.
Yeah, I mean, it can't get more simple than that, and just a testament to how wonderful God's creation is that we have everything that we need and that we don't have to go anywhere, don't have to pay anybody. Um, it really is magical in that sense. But as you mentioned, the mental factors play a big role in it. So we are so powerful that if we believe we are limited, if we believe we are powerless, then we become that. So it's stepping into that realization,
Yeah.
stepping into knowing that I am okay. I will be okay if I take this next step. I can take this leap of faith. But it wouldn't be a leap of faith if we were absolutely certain. So there's a sense of danger or risk involved within it, which makes it all exciting.
I I think you bring up such thought-provoking statements sometimes. I always want to like expand upon it. One thing that I've been thinking about recently is I always think about Jesus, 40-day fast and stuff like that. But I do think that, they talk about the virgin birth, and I kind of theorize that Mary was a very pure being. And obviously, Jesus was capable of doing many great things. But that's what it looks like when a pure baby comes into the world. He's capable of many things. That we're so not used to a pure human that it's mind blowing. Like if this person's capable of so much, wow. But in my opinion, Jesus wanted us to be like him. He's like, you can do this too. And I think that there's like a purification process where you I had a good point to make, but I forgot what it was. You're pretty much purifying the body, obviously, and you're capable of kind of achieving so much more after the fast. And just like it's a different personality in my opinion. But yeah.
100%. Yeah. I mean, that's why he gave the greatest example of this death and rebirth, the death and resurrection. And it wasn't to, from the church's perspective, to say, oh, here's this one son of God that he's the only one that can do it, and you're all just a bunch of worthless sinners that can't amount to
Yeah.
anything. Like that's the biggest lie, arguably, that we've been told, and very, very damaging when we start to believe these things. But if
Hmm.
you actually look at his teachings and what he was saying, no, you can do this too. You the kingdom of heaven is within. We just have to purify our temples. We have to cleanse ourselves and step into our highest calling. But it is extremely challenging and very contrasting when you have a society designed completely the opposite to keep people from realizing this and keep people afraid of stepping into practices like dry fasting and whatever else, because it's a threat to the control scheme. It's a threat to everything else that exists within that. So yeah, I do see that shifting considerably. And of course, we're coming into a new age, a new era. And I don't know how deeply you're familiar with the great year, that roughly 26,000 year cycle that we're going through. We're right on the cusp of that. So I mentioned the winter coming into spring on a yearly cycle, but on the great year cycle, we're also coming out of that winter into spring as well. So all of these control schemes were much more effective during during these winter moments, but all of
Yeah.
that's changing, all of that's shifting. So that's why these conversations are allowed to be had without both of us being killed or taken
Yeah.
out for talking about them, because everything's shifting in that direction, which is very exciting and encouraging to
Good
see.
point. Control scheme is a good word for it too. Is I look at like since I'm into detox, I look at everything as detoxification. And so when you start exposing the control scheme, that's when the parasites, expose themselves. You're getting the rash, systemically, and they gnash their teeth. They're not okay with it. They try to put you back in your box, like stop fasting. We like staying in the host. And there's a detoxification occurring, worldwide right now for sure. But it's a
Absolutely.
crazy thing because, not to branch onto a different topic, but oftentimes when people do these psychedelics or they fast and they have these psychedelic experiences, one of the biggest questions that I'm still kind of trying to figure out is this happening externally or is it happening internally? You know? And I think that sometimes we're all like doing, I don't know, sometimes it feels like once I purify myself, the world also changes. Like it's a weird relationship between your own inner universe and how that's expressed through the entire planet, because right now I feel like we're on the same frequency, which is now I feel like the collective conversation right now is talking about how parasites alter your frequency and to get your frequency back, because now you're kind of purifying your colors, your chakras. And I think that that's kind of like, and also like inhabiting different energies can inhabit you once you start vibrating at a different frequency. So holy spirits can occupy you when you're purified, and now demonic spirits can occupy you when you have dirty pool water. You know,
Yep.
so
Yeah, exactly. Very well said. And it is the choice. We are always possessed by something, but the choice of what we are possessed by is
yeah.
ours to make. So
That's
it's
a hard
important.
thing for people to grasp, though. It's like,
Yes.
I'm not possessed. I'm like, you're not getting the point.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very encouraging to just to see these shifts in all these ways. And I'd say to your question around if this is happening just internally or externally, I'd say it has to be both. There is there
Mm,
is no there is no real separation other than through perception. So any sense of separation is simply for the fun of it to have this experience.
yeah.
This experience wouldn't exist without the perception of separation. But in reality, everything is connected. So there's no accidents, there's no coincidences, there's nothing that doesn't have a ripple effect in that regard. So
Mm.
by you pioneering out there and saying, "Hey, I want to try dry fasting for 21 days," even though I don't know anybody else who's done that, is sending that sort of courageous ripple effect out into the ether so that others can tap into that and pick up on that as well, and we can have conversations like this.
Yeah, it's so true. People, if I've kind of given anything to society, it's pretty much showing that the 4 minute mile can be achieved. You can break some records that people thought were impossible. Um, and I think that most people will consider themselves empaths, where they're like, everyone thinks that they're an empath. And so when they see that a human being can do it, they're like, oh, that means that I can achieve it as well. And people will do this in silence. So somebody will book a consultation like 2 years after they achieve something. I had no idea they did. They're like, oh, I did a 13-day dry fast because I watched your content and just did it. I'm like, I would have no idea that this person in Austria did this like randomly if you didn't just like, tell me at one point. So that's why I'm very, very strict about what I put out there, and saying it in a safe way and make sure people prep well. They're not unintelligently doing this because they're really motivated, because of a good talk.
Right. Yeah, and that is the risk in getting the message out in any which way is knowing your audience and who you're speaking to. And that's why in a lot of these sort of secret societies and things, they would have pragmatic ways that you had to prove your worth in order to receive certain information because it can be quite dangerous. And again, that's why I'm not suggesting that anybody go out there and try a 21-day dry fast right off the bat. You have to work your way up to it. You have to earn your rank in order to be able to extend to those
Hmm.
levels. And it takes a
That's
lot of work and dedication. Go ahead.
that's what I'll say earlier is actually that's where I think it can be an internal thing. So I was mentioning the whole Jesus like theory earlier, and then I was mentioning how you can it's a faith. That's the capital F in faith. I realized that's my version because I always thought I was spiritual until I did like a 12-day dry fast, and then I become very pure and I became one with like the elements, and I'm walking slowly and breathing, and a whole different experience with the physicality, connecting mind and body, and the spirit was kind of being connected, mind, body, and spirit. And then I realized that once you know, dissolve the fear constructs that are coming in, telling you that you're going to die, this is crazy, you've lost your mind. People say you can't do this, break the fast. I realized that that's the capital F. When I think that all religions are kind of deviations of what once was truth, and then it got disseminated into control schemes but it's really just telling people how to kind of regain their body back so that they can achieve capital T truth within themselves because God exists within all of us. They don't want you to know that you're that powerful. So the capital F faith is telling you like you can go another day on the fast. Trust, have faith in your body, because that's how you re-achieve the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, beautifully said. It is that that very much so, very much agreed.
Sounds
Yeah,
right, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So curious, if maybe you could walk us through the 21-day dry fast, and maybe it changes, maybe it's varied each. I'm sure it has in subtle ways, but sort of the big markers that you see as you go through an extended dry fast in that way. And of course, you can talk of physical things, but I would love to hear sort of spiritual revelations and things that you sort of started to see or realize as you were going deeper into those.
Do you want to hear it based on like starting from an infected body trying to cure something and then
Yeah, maybe.
achieving 21 days?
Yeah,
Or from the
maybe
state? Okay.
maybe starting there and then shifting into now, like what you experience now that you're not really curing systemic things.
Yeah. Um, so I think that it's interesting for people to hear the infected journey because most people are kind of dealing with something now and they want to. So oftentimes I think what's kind of being pushed into, this earth is different laboratory made illnesses that are coming into form with your mucus. People are like inflammatory and responding to mold and, different things. So if that is happening, that means that they're going to start feeling that inflammation kind of flowing through the body. So the first day, normal. Everyone can do like one day. You know, Hour 16, you kind of get into autophagy, and then the second day, it's kind of like a little bit more pronounced, and you're pretty much more fully in autophagy. You're kind of starting to feel thirsty and hungry, and your cravings are still very much there. You have your gut biome is very much alive, and all the foods that you once were eating, you're going to start craving them. Like, no, I need the cheeseburgers, I need, the avocado, whatever food that you eat. So your mind will actually think about the foods that the bacteria is dying off from. Like, so if you have bacteria that's dying off, that's the food that's persuading you to eat it. So your second brain is your stomach for a reason. But then you start disassociating from your bacteria the more you kill that, your biome off, and you realize that that is not part of your personality. So on day 3, you're like, I'm ready for this fast to be done. Mind you, I'm doing 21 days. Day 3, I already want it to be done, right? So now that's kind of like a transitionary point when you're kind of fully in ketosis. Hence, online says that you die at 3 days. You're kind of just ready to be done with it, and it kind of goes by pretty fast. And I feel like by day four, you're starting to feel kind of like, rumblings in your body, itching and crawling and things that are kind of like, it starts exposing what's going on in the body. So people that didn't know they have something wrong with them, they're getting an itchy scalp. Maybe they're feeling a little like squirming in their eyeball, or their feet are itching. You're inciting the war, the immune war, and by day five, that's when like the cravings go away, and you've pretty much successfully put the gut biome at an all-time low, so you're not craving these things, and you're able to kind of see a glimmer of what is possible with dry fasting, because your body has normalized that state. It's like, oh, this isn't just because the person forgot to eat, this is on purpose. And if you're kind of if you're aligning that with you accepting the fast, now your body's calm, and your body is acknowledging that this is on purpose, right? So it's like, okay, we're going to assist this process, and so you start acclimating to this environment, and you realize that like, oh, all my symptoms are gone. So you start kind of like normalizing that, like, well, I'm not getting the things that I was trying to fight from. I'm not, I don't have any eczema. I have good cognitive ability. Um, and maybe, an intended rash is going away. Oftentimes people want to get rid of an infection or something like that in their skin. It's very easy to get rid of with a fast. Usually 7 to 9 days is required for that. So I'll skip day 6. It's pretty much the same thing as day 5. Day 7, you pretty much have like this. That's when the fast really begins. If you're kind of going after hardcore illness, that's kind of like when, in my opinion, that's like day 1 for chronic disease, and you're exacerbating the underlying conditions. Parasites aren't getting fed, and then psychologically, you're kind of thinking, who told me to do this? Why have I got this information? Like, this isn't normal for me to dry fast. Like, was I fooled? Did Trevor really dry fast? Like, maybe I should stop. And is that you, or are you being told lies by different frequencies inside you that are like, please break the fast. We want to keep existing within the host. And this is kind of like level 1 of like um, disassociating yourself from things that might not be serving you within the body, or the mind, because that's, what we're getting to later on in the fast. You start detaching from the intangible parasites, the mental constructs that maybe you got ancestrally or traumatically when you're a child, or different things that appeal to you egotistically or materialistically that aren't serving you. People achieve this when they take max doses of like mushrooms or some kind of like psychedelic. And so by day 7, day 8, you can get like a really white tongue. Your tongue is really start showing splotches of like different healing that's going on systemically. So if the liver's being cured, or like the lungs, the left and right side of your tongue is becoming red, and the candida is kind of like constantly a white thrush that you want to like, you want to scrape off essentially with a copper tongue scraper. And then sometimes you can have your hair becomes really greasy, because oftentimes that's essentially where, that's essentially like liquefied dandruff. So the mucus comes to the head, flakes off kind of like boogers do, and you get them on your shoulders, and like, I got dandruff. That's just mucus. It's the pathogens running to the top of your head, running away from your immune system and solidifying and flaking off. That on a fast, that turns into greasy hair, which eventually your hair turns clean on a fast, because it's fully regenerated. There's no more mucus. Same thing with the bottom of your feet. Like when people get pedicures, you kind of shave off some of the calcifications, because that's just essentially the same thing as dandruff. So the top and bottom of the body, the immune system chases it. So when you get to day 11, that's when like the spiritual implications come into play, and you are pretty much seeing the benefits of like the anti-inflammatory states, where your brain has no inflammation, no mucus surrounding it. You have access to it. Your pineal gland is decalcified. And this state will only be available to you if you are calm and collected and accepting. Because if you're in a panic state, the spirit is not going to allow itself to enjoy the benefits of it. So just know that you're not gonna die, as long as you have enough fat on you. But And so eventually on day 12 and day 13, that's when like the biggest demonic influences. So ironically, that's when so things like HSV, like herpes and like HIV, that's when it's reached the apex. That's when it's completely exacerbated. It's really pissed off, kind of like the control schemes in the world. Like they just want to stay in the body. Like, how the hell did you figure out about dry fasting? This is not cool. Like, and it's at the pinnacle of like, fight. And so that's when people usually want to break the fast, ironically, because that's, the biggest exacerbation. Like, you are fighting a huge demon that people would even, say is incurable, and that's what they want you to think. But if you're a crazy bastard like me, like, you're gonna know that every single thing can be solved, everything can be cured in the body, unless you got, the modern day medicine wants you to cut organs out. That's the point of no return. It's hard to, regenerate organs. So don't let them cut any organs out, because dry fasting is surgery without the scalpel. So when you get to beyond day 13, you can overcome this demonic influence. You're pretty much you're not feeding the demonic influence, which is depending on you to feed your food, and so it can stay in control of puppeteering you. And you are on the back end of it. Now you're doing like janitorial work after that. So it's pretty much like sweeping up the dead parasites that don't really have a influence over you. You're on day 14, and that's when, ironically, you start getting unlocked to even deeper spiritual states. It can, for like 90% of people, they're not able to reach that level because they're not doing the prep that we discussed, and like detoxifying enough to do it again. I couldn't have done like a deep fast right away. I had to do the smaller fast to kind of unlock myself lymphatically.
Hmm.
And then eventually at day 15, whether I like it or not, like, that's when I'm experiencing very lucid dreams. And you're going to be attacked with different fear constructs that pop into place. And it's just kind of very important to acknowledge these things and acknowledge that this is just a passing cloud. It's the fear that's being presented to you. Do you want to imbibe that into your soul, or do you want to, push it to the side and realize that, be on your way? You're pretty much like purifying the mental strength, like, and having the capital F, faith. And so eventually, when you get to day 16, like, your tongue couldn't have been worse. The tongue is like splotchy and disgusting, and it's just like showing you, and you want to rinse your mouth out, and it's just like, I give up. I'm gonna go to the bathroom. I have to brush my teeth. Like, I don't care, but you have to. This is the gauntlet of detox. This is the gauntlet. Like this, you have to go through so many different gauntlets. So from day 7 until day 17, that's the 10 days worth of gauntlets. That's 240 hours of disgustingness. You're coughing, hawking up like mucus, and you sound like a demon, almost like just like different sounds you're making to hawk up, snotting up different like, inflammation from your headspace and unclogging your sinuses. Like, you're purifying your vessels. This is what purification looks like, and this is why a lot of people cannot achieve it. Um, and then eventually you're constantly spitting in like a container. And because like your sinuses are getting cleaned, so your body's trying to purge, right? It's just like one big purge. And then eventually when you get to like day 18 and a half, like, your tongue's showing the first signs of like, oh, maybe I can achieve like a pink tongue. Maybe this is actually, a complete reset is possible. And that's when it's very hard to achieve after that point. Like, even a very strong-minded person who's practiced fasting, is hard to transcend that point, because now you're really earning like some serious, like, hardcore stuff that's very deep, and very few people in this earth have achieved it to the point where, like, what is possible on, in this realm. That's kind of like the point you're at psychologically at that point. And so that's when you're purifying your inner universe, and that's not to go on a tangent, but that's exactly why I think that the control schemes are so after each one of our individual vessels, is
Hmm.
because they realize that we are baby universes that is going to turn into a whole different, a whole different realm, and they better kill that off and poison it and make sure it's a dark realm that serves them. Because if you purify it, that's going to be an incredible, beautiful universe. That's going to be very life-giving and just nothing but like love and positive frequencies. But if you inoculate darkness and parasites, at least we have a fighting chance, you know. Go beyond day 18, now you're officially like a star seed. You're planting a purified universe, in my opinion. But and so that's when you start getting attacked by, you know, the actual devil. So now you've reached the end boss of the video game, you know. And ironically, I've had a couple clients go that far, and they've, without me even telling them, they would hear like an evil cackle. You know,
Mm.
I heard this very intelligent evil cackle based on, because it can hear you, and it can even hear your thoughts. And Jesus was tempted in the desert on deep on his fast, ironically. So there's no coincidence there. And because you have so many guardian angels, and like there's different levels of entities that are like observing you, and you feel this now because paranoia is presented to you, the opposite
Mm.
of you being looked after in a positive way.
Mhm.
And so now you really feel like the whole universe is focused on you. Like if your life is a movie, this is a very entertaining movie to watch, and they're all on board watching this right now. Like this person figured out the main problem, you know, dependency on food, and consciously abstaining from that to purify themselves, the ultimate act of self-love. Let's tune into this film. And so you're kind of you're being observed by entities and dimensions without time, you know. So they have all the time in the world to listen to you and laugh at you and cackle at you once you fail and trip and make mistakes, and um, but they can do nothing about it. Like you figured the game out, this is the golden egg, and all you have to do is just persevere and stay confident and calm, and keeping things simple. Breathe through the nose, have some outside air, let time pass, because you can get very befuddled with time, because 1 minute can feel like it lasts 10 hours. And then eventually, like you forget that you're even fasting. Sometimes you can wake up and think that you broke the fast. There's a lot of trickeries that happen. You know, these energies are trying anything they can do to prevent the full purity, you know, purification process. And it's something that's very hard to reach, you know. And eventually it comes down to time. Like if you it, and that's what I think that sometimes God is, not to digress, but like I think that God possibly can be defined as time itself, you know. So you're detoxing time to the point where it's slowing down as you go deeper in the fast, at the same time that you're purifying yourself. So you're becoming as godlike as you can, you know, by trusting this whole process. And you're becoming one with the creator once the full, you let time pass. You're
Mhm.
detoxing time because there's no way around it. A rich person and the poor person still have to pay the price of time,
Mhm.
you know? And so it's, one day is one day. And so not even Bill Gates can escape death. He's got to pay the 21-day dry fast if he wants to not be killed by the blood clotting that's going to eventually ensue for even the richest of people. You know?
Yeah, that's powerful. Thank you for that. And just on that last note of time being the sort of final point. And I mean, it makes sense from an esoteric standpoint too, because Saturn or Chronos is the seventh. So that's why it's Saturn's rings, because it's the rings that contain this whole experience. And Saturn is Chronos, which is the god of time. So
Ooh.
time is sort of the god of this whole seemingly separated experience. But then going beyond that, recognizing that we are truly timeless. Of course, as we're playing this experience, then we are time bound. But truly, that's not me. This is merely just my avatar here playing in this experience, getting to have that. So you're unlocking those layers and those levels. And I love the video game analogy too, because even those sort of, we could call them demonic entities or parasites or whatever, they serve a higher purpose in that they're, as you mentioned, gauntlets to prove worth, because with great power comes great responsibility. So as we step into greater levels of power, as you mentioned, like unlocking this universe that we've got contained within this aspect of consciousness, there's a ton of power that comes with that. And so if we have not earned that power, then we risk using that in ways that are damaging to self and others, which there is no other, it's just self. So it's there as that sort of pragmatic way of proving who's ready to step into that next space, who's ready to step into that higher form. And there's no test that you can fake or cheat on. It's like there's no other way to get around it other than going this diligently into something, as our ego
Yeah.
might want to con the system, but there's no way around it.
I think it was very, profound what you just said. That's the name of the game. You pretty much summed up one of the purposes of life right there. um, I think that's probably what like observers are thinking when they see a miracle occur. They're like, why not me? What I should be able to achieve this. Do I just like, cast a spell or hocus pocus? Like, how come this person can just touch somebody and heal them? Like it's because like you said, if you don't completely embody that energy, then you're not going to have access to it, because anybody who's falsely living, it's just not there for them. You're not going to, if you're living in that false frequency, you're not going to be able to achieve these things. um, and some I've descended, I've definitely like I've descended from like forms that I feel like were optimal and like I was very proud of and like, very like balanced and at peace and like walking with certainty and confidence. But I've also kind of gone back to that. You get like in this weird loop where you're like chasing the past, but also like where was I the best, Um, and then I realized that it's take a deep breath, just chill out, stop being impatient, and that's why I like to kind of do these fasts annually because I'm able to like remind myself, oh, that's where it is. It's my true self is just me, breathing, being calm, taking things slow. Because if my higher self has communicated anything to me, it's really just like chill out, walk slowly, talk slowly, be present, because oftentimes it's really hard to, even when you're eating, it's hard to be present to every single little bite you take
Hmm.
because you want to put the phone up and watch something or listen to something. But if you really are completely conscious about every single present moment, like every single morsel of food, which is easy to do after a fast because it's all you're thinking about, it's a whole universe, every single bite, even the smallest bites, you can really take your time with it.
Yeah, I love that. And your comments around the descending and then ascending and this sort of process going back and forth within that. I mean, that is the bodhisattva, which is the one who chooses to stay behind to share the message. So there's a purpose in that as well, and that of course we can individually go into this elevation practice, but at some point we lose our ability to communicate and reach others. If we go too far, we lose our ability to connect in that kind of way. So I
Mm.
see, since we're all collectively connected, to having those who are like yourself willing to reach out and touch the unknown and go off into these spaces that haven't been reached before, at least not in modern history. Of course, that's all been distorted quite significantly as well.
Yeah.
But going on that allows you to come back and have that message to share, to say, hey, I've been to this space and it's okay to go here. And that helps collectively all for, so that,
Hmm.
because it's better, it's more fun to do together. So that's
Hmm.
sort of recognition that, yeah, I could do this individually, but why not share that? And why don't we all do it together in that way and have that collective experience? So yeah, thank you for your service in that.
Yeah, yeah, vice versa. I mean,
Yeah.
it's I always say when people say that, I'm always like, I am you, like you're doing this as well. Like it's I sometimes I see somebody who's like very infected and like
Uh-oh, might have lost him. You there? You're breaking up quite a bit, Trevor. I don't know if you can hear me.
um, but yeah. Yeah,
All right. It
yeah, I
seems
can hear you perfectly. Are you
okay.
can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it seems like you're back. Your video's not coming through, but I think we can hear you okay. So if you want to start back with what you were starting with just a second ago. Oh,
Yeah.
now you're
Oh, yeah,
now
my power shut off. Yeah, that's what it was.
okay, gotcha. Now your camera's sideways.
Um, okay.
There you go.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's perfect.
All right, let me twist my camera then. Yeah, that's weird. Oh, here we go. Yeah.
Perfect.
See, I kind of need to go to the bathroom real quick.
But yeah, take your time. I'll gather some questions from people, but yeah, we'll pause there. Yeah, so thank you everyone for being here in the chat with us. I see we've got Daryl, Ingrid, Roseanne, Angela, Valerie, Michael, Paisley. Thanks for being here, Cheryl. Yeah, I see your questions, Roseanne, Donadika, and I'll make sure we get to those as we go through it. But yeah, just appreciate y'all for being here, and hopefully we'll have some more time to go through more questions. So if you have any more, feel free to relay in the chat, and we'll get to those for sure. But it's really encouraging hearing from someone who's gone on a venture like this, and not just once but many times, to hear just like that expansive test, and that expansive journey that we can go through exploring avenues like this. And of course, I think this sort of awareness can be achieved through other means, but I don't think anything is more effective or simpler than just simply abstaining from all that we're told we need to have consistently on a regular basis. Yeah, agreed. Roseanne is very inspiring. And, just want to continue to put the disclaimer out there. I'm not recommending anybody jump right into something long. Is something that has to be done low and slow, and take your time with it. But it is very encouraging to hear from somebody like that.
Three disclaimers is always better than one, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I don't know if you remember what you said before you lost your power. If you wanted to touch on that, if not, we can move on if it's lost.
Yeah, it's lost. Yeah, definitely lost.
Yeah. Okay. So Roseanne was asking, do you feel like you could live indefinitely by continually doing long dry fasts?
Um, Definitely is a funny, that was the first thing my ego wanted to tell me is like, "Ooh, you're breatharian, you're so cool. Like you can live as long as you want." But I do think that information is lost. Like I do really believe that people live beyond 1,000 years. I truly believe that, and just like I have these theories about dry fasting was able to achieve them, and crazy thoughts to people initially. But I do think that we've been genetically modified a little bit so that the ability to live that long is a little bit harder. But if you look at like Lyme disease, for instance, it leaves a bullseye target. And then if people who successfully achieve to cure it actually rewind time and achieve the bullseye target when they cure it completely, oftentimes with fasting. Okay. So the same concept happens with fasting in that you're kind of rewiring genetically, you know, your physiology, where you're able to rewind time. But in my opinion, it takes multiple generations. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been born with certain dental, structures that right away. I have to be responsible for the previous decisions of these my ancestors that didn't know these things. But so it's going to be like a community, generational thing where this information is passed on. I can live to 130. Now my son can do 150 and his son can do 180. Just the same way we descended in longevity, we can also ascend back to 1,000 years. And I do believe that we're going to achieve that fairly quickly.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think there's a yeah, I think there's a lot of rewiring that we have to do, but it's not jumping into anything new. We're simply just remembering our true capabilities and who we truly are. So yeah, I agree with that. And yeah, it is encouraging to as I always say, I'm going to aim for the high score. So however long I can get to, I'll go for it. But I'm also not attached to any number idea. As might as well we just keep going as far as we can, do the best we can, and every layer of that we get to is going to be helpful for this collective experience that we're having.
Yeah, you want to do it well. You want to be agile and like sharp.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
not a bad looking 130, it's a good looking
Yeah,
130.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Roseanne also asked, how can you prepare and bulk up for a dry fast? She says, I'm not super skinny, but definitely does, not fat. Um, I'd imagine you wouldn't want to be eating heavy prior, if that makes sense. So what do you suggest? And most everyone listening is going to be we follow like a whole food plant-based kind of way of being. So I think most people listening are going to be tuning into that frequency. So what would you suggest as far as like ways to bulk up prior to a fast?
Um, so I am along the line, the thought process of definitely bulking up before the longer fasts. Um, so I do just the idea of like eating more. There's ancient grains. I'm not sure if you're opposed to that. You know, and I think it's just pretty much eating more fats and just eating more and getting yourself up to like, at least 21 BMI. And therefore you'd be able to kind of like more safely go about it. Like I've done so many mistakes and done so many fasts that I know that getting serious about intestinal cleansing should only occur like, 48 hours before the fast when you got to start eating very light and things that aren't going to stick around in your digestional tract too long. Um, and so therefore, it's just, obviously do the laxatives and then doing the six enemas the morning of the fast. Even a salt flush is beneficial to some people. It's a little bit hardcore for me, so I don't really do that. But yeah, it's just doing 3 meals a day where you're adding like a lot of avocados and lentils and stuff like that. Coconut yogurts, splurge and like have some coconut butter, things that are dense in calories.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And as far as the ancient grains, like, are you, which ones are you referring to? I know quinoa is one that, and then there's like, a lot of them that I'm not as familiar with, but what do you think of when you say that?
Yeah, I was trying to think of it like the end. It's on the tip of my tongue. It's just like something with a Z. Um, it's weird names like Amrith or something like that. It's like I don't know. I forget the name of it. Um, like Ezekiel bread is one in
Right.
America that have like they have usually has some ancient grain breads as well.
Hmm.
But it's mostly in line of what the body can comprehend and digest. Like um, we understand this kind of grain, instead of like a more modern day genetically modified grain that's not really processed that well.
Right.
I feel like grains are a way to kind of stack calories, you know. Um, so yeah, I like kind of incorporating that sometimes before a fast
Okay. And
or
then
like a month leading up to the fast. Like, yeah,
right. And then obviously as you're going into the preparation, you're going to be shifting to a lighter, more hydrating for the day, couple days prior to the fast. You'll be shifting to
yeah,
that. And then yeah, you mentioned cleansing the digestion tract using things like enemas and oxy powder and other ways to help cleanse that area as well, which I found to be really helpful as well. It's kind of a pain to do that many enemas in a row, but you definitely appreciate it when you're not dealing with that during a longer fast. Um,
yeah.
so yeah, and then let's see. Yeah, so Cheryl asks, I've been all liquid 9 months, little fat reserves. Are you saying you would not recommend a dry fast for me also? She's done prior 3-day dry fast.
I mean, the all liquids is good for like, living your life and maintaining. I even like I think that's kind of like the future possibly is people just having coconut water or like raw milk or just sticking to one thing. But like I said, like your body's a survival vessel, so it always has inventory of what it has. It's sufficient in. So if you're mineral sufficient, you're going to be okay with that. Like fats, minerals, and proteins, and if you're hydrated, you're entering the dry fast in like a very good. Your inventory is all set. But if you're a fruitarian or liquidarian that's very low BMI and you're already a skeleton, there's no inventory. So your body's not able to pull from things in order to last a longer,
period of time. Like I said before, skinny person and the fat person achieve the same detox at the same time. So oftentimes in my retreats that these fruitarians usually have the hardest time, getting to day 5. And it's just a lot harder because there's not much fat, so their body's already tipping into muscle tissue, you know. You want to be muscle preserving and being able to have, the insurance policy of the fat going into the fast. And this is a serious thing, the dry fasting. And the
Yeah.
people that come into the fatal consequences are the ones that kind of approach this, from doing 121 days of liquid or fruit and then going into a fast. They get so obsessed with the dry fast because they see the benefits of it that they just, never rehydrate. There's a time and a place. This is like, to use a negative term for dry fasting, you're wasting away, you're downsizing, but you don't want to be wasting away leading into the wasting away, you know. You want to stack the cards in your favor and then get the amount of days that you need to get done to cure the Crohn's disease or whatever you're after, and then go right back to rebuilding. Because a lot of it, just to wrap up, is understanding, what does my body actually want when I'm not fasting? And your body will tell you that while you're fasting, you know. And so you do that. You get, mineral sufficient after the fast. You get healthy fats for your brain, which is 80% fats. You want to have the proteins that build composition on the body. I demonized protein when I was fruitarian. So I now I see it as like, oh, it blatantly is building muscle and and composition to the body.
Yeah, it does. I've certainly shifted a little bit in that direction as well, of just seeing, the denser, more protein rich sources can be helpful for providing those building blocks. So it just depends on what you're going for. I would say that, liquid cleanses and things like, they can be very helpful for addressing lots within the body. But as Trevor's saying, not necessarily pairing that with a dry fast. You want to be kind of committed to one or the other, within the periods. Of course, you know, throughout a year, my body can shift considerably as far as how much I weigh and what I'm doing. And so as long as I'm intentional about what am I trying to achieve in this moment, and where am I going, then I'm not trying to pile everything on all at once. And I'm focused on one avenue at a time.
Yeah. The people who fail are the ones that rush into it, they like, give me the remedy. And the people who succeed are gently, preparing for it over the course of months, always in the subconscious, like I'm going to fast in November, like I'm
Right.
going to build up into it. And yeah, everything is gentle. Breaking the fast is gentle. Fasting is gentle. And seems like forced behavior is never successful,
Right.
when you're desperate for something, it just moves farther away from you.
Yeah, well, even in those spiritual moments that you have towards, the later teens within a dry fast, like as you mentioned, you have to be in a state of allowance in order to receive those divine frequencies. And there's no accident that the number 19 it's often esoterically linked with surrender, because it's the 1 and the 9, so it represents that completion between the full cycle, and you have to surrender in order to fully step into that. So it's perfect that's a marker where you really have to surrender to that, where the fears are trying to pull you out of it and everything's trying to steer you away from that. So yeah, of course, everything fits in that way.
It's crazy how one word can give your whole physiology peace, So if surrender is your thing, then that'll work like deep in the fast. Mine was like acceptance. It
Mm,
meant multiple different things. Acceptance of whatever may come, acceptance of the detox, acceptance of, and that gave me a lot of peace going, deeper.
right. Yeah, that state of non-attachment, which is the Buddhist principle, but also, as you mentioned, all of these ascended masters were teaching the same thing. The messages get distorted and mistranslated and taken in all sorts of different directions, but it's all coming back to that simplicity, that we have everything that we need. We're created perfectly in that way. We just have to get out of our own way. A lot of times, we have to recognize that we're the only ones standing between us and that. Yeah. Yeah, Donadika asked, how many times have you been able to achieve over 20 days in a dry fast?
Not many times. I kind of lost count, honestly. I've done a lot of fasts to 15 days. But with regards to 20 days, I've done 3 fasts, 20 days and beyond. And I've done a whole bunch from, 17 and plus. So I've done about 10 fasts that are longer than 17. But like, the last level of that game, the end boss is like day 18. That's the hard part, to get over that hump. And so yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. And Paisley was asking, what are your thoughts on Oran therapy? Do you ever incorporate that practice, Shivambu? I know you've talked about it before. Just curious where your relationship is with that now.
I think that if your community is plant-based, then that's the perfect people to do foreign therapy,
Yeah.
and obviously uh, a toxic person will have toxic, liquids for somebody else to drink, but a purified person will have healing, waters. I even will go as far as to say that that wine that Jesus drank before his death was actually orin, it was fasted pee, which was healing waters,
Mm.
my flesh and blood. That's what urine is. So there's a lot of arguments for it, and people who don't understand it is just like it's a hard concept, just like dry fasting is. Um, but there's calories in urine. And so I'm along the line of thought that, any food doesn't heal. It'll get you really clean intestinally and your tissues will feel very detox and pure, but that'll be just enough for pathogens and parasites to feed on. Even though the uric acid in the urine is dissolving the biofilm, the calories in the urine will keep it alive. And so with the liquid, just like the water fasting.
Mm.
So I love it, especially if you're doing like one meal a day or like maybe just like one day urine fasting your week and you can kind of like reset, it's great.
Yeah.
Rubbing it on the skin. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely has. I've seen so many benefits that way, but that's interesting as far as the so essentially you think urine would interrupt ketosis and autophagy, you think?
I think it'll keep very high autophagy and ketosis. It's just a matter of, and you'll detox very deeply. But if,
Mm.
if you're looking for a cure, I mean, that's gonna be harder to come by. I
Mm.
think that if people have found a cure, they have to just wait a couple weeks. Maybe they just lower the viral load very low, and it'll just parasites can recolonize, and then it's now you're back to square one again. And so, for a person that said they were cured, just wait a couple weeks and then give us the information. Did he really? It probably does happen. There's some miracles, with urine fasting. I mean, people do achieve great things. Maybe it's a very easy pathogenic strain in the intestines that was, able to be cured from it. But with regards to things that are like commonly known as incurable, I think a little bit more than urine fasting is required, like the dry fasting.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. Paisley also asked when talking about bulking up to prepare for an extended dry fast. She says she follows typically an 18-6 or 19-5 intermittent fasting period. And I know you talk highly of intermittent fasting and narrowing the eating window. So she's asking, how would someone go into preparing for a dry fast with such a narrow eating window? Should she expand that for that period of time, or keep the narrow eating window and just be cramming it in during that time?
Depends on how long of a fast she's kind of looking to do.
Mhm.
But transitioning the thought process to being like, okay, you're getting the benefits of fasting from intermittent fasting. Now you're kind of like putting that on steroids with like the dry fasting for a longer period of time. You're accomplishing a lot more, with the dry fast. So it's okay by extending your eating window beforehand to, for the greater good of what you intend on doing, the dry fast, the 3 or 4 or 5 day dry fast. Because your metabolism is kind of like a rubber band. It's very flexible. So it's kind of altered by your activity, but also your gut biome. So the healthier your gut biome, the more lean you're going to be. It's easy to get abs. Your bacteria is also eating, your food, not just you. So on the way through the intestinal gauntlet, you get all this bacteria taking pieces off your food that are digesting. But if you don't have any bacteria, that's things when things are sedentary and you're producing nitrogen and carbon dioxide and things get gaseous, um, and things get stagnant. So two things can do that: having no bacteria and having too much mucus in the intestines will make things traffic jam, and then you get acid reflux and constipation.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and on the topic of intermittent fasting, I, do you suggest with an intermittent fast to dry fast during that fasting window, or is it ideal to continue drinking water when you're not going deeper into a dry fast?
I think I think that's the next step after urine, therapy. When people find that, they start to realize that they don't need to drink any water at all. It's the next step, because like on a plant-based diet, you're having such hydrating foods that are not cooked. So like everything is pretty much 90% hydration. So you can definitely get away with dry fasting in your intermittent fasting window, because everything you eat is essentially hydrating. It's already structured water in that
Hmm.
fruit, that food. Um, and it's kind of mind blowing for a lot of people, but to me, it's fairly obvious. It probably is to you as well that you can eat your hydration. But a lot
Hmm.
of people are baffled by that concept. Um, but yeah, you definitely can. You're gonna dry fasting point blank is just like way more beneficial. It's way more detoxifying than anything else. So you're gonna get more bang for your buck by not having fluids in your fasting window. Hopefully you're smart enough to acknowledge, am I showing signs of dehydration? Are my lips chapped? My fingers showing like, dryness? Because then you need to moderate your hydrating window or
Yeah.
your idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, you gotta be honest with yourself and know where you are and not try and be skipping steps or just doing something just because Trevor does it or because I do it or whatever. Yeah, that's a good point there. Cool. Yeah, and Donadika asked, do you have support of your family? Like, do they ever join you on fast, or what do they think about your adventures in this space?
Good question. At first, they were trying to call the ambulance. You're coming across information before pe friends and family have found it. So it's not only triggering for them, because they love you so much, but it's also challenging them to conceptualize things that they can't even believe. How can the body not need food or water for healing? That doesn't make sense to me. It needs water and food, right? Um, so I looked healthy when I was unhealthy, so it was hard for them to grasp.
Hmm.
And so eventually I had to show them the blood test and show them like the rashes I was getting and like being like, hey, this is working. This is the only thing that's working. They're like, go to a doctor. Like, I'm like, I've been to the best doctors in the world. I literally waited 6 months for appointments and got the medications. I've done all this stuff before. You're just busy with your own life working and you're not like specifically in tune with my life. So I showed them the results. I showed them the pictures. Like the rashes going away and like the blood test being clean, and it was pretty much obvious to them that this is working. And then all of a sudden, clients are starting to call me every single day and getting results and showing me like testimonies and like, hey, this is like obviously everyone's healing as well, like. And so now they find themselves that they're fasting. They're doing every single thing I say. So from calling me crazy and like wanting to call the ambulance to like now taking my advice, but also like what you'll find if you do partake in this journey is that everyone is shallow. Everyone's very superficial. So they're going to judge you based on your appearance and looks. The hotter the person on Instagram, the more views and likes they have, right? You're not going to have obese people and emaciated people getting a lot of likes and views. So you got to look good. Your family's the same exact way. So if you're giving them, advice when you look like crap, you're screwed. You got to look good. So make sure if you, by understanding the mind body connection, you're going to look good once you get closer to the truth, you know?
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And yeah, maybe not. Yeah, just be mindful of where you are within the process, because there, of course, as we go through this process of breaking down in order to reform, and we go through various cleanses and detox and fast and things, I know that my body and facial structure and everything has looked quite different at various times. So that wouldn't be as much of a time to go out and advocate to those who are unaware that hey, this is the way. But wait until you've kind of shifted back into that rebuilding phase and you've got some more, substance to you, then that makes it a lot easier for that message to get across, because it can be
Mhm.
quite counterproductive, because it can scare people off from doing these things, and that might be doing them a disservice later on. So yeah, that's a good point to consider for sure. Yeah, Roseanne was asking, so over the years, she's had horrific food poisoning, especially while traveling and eating locally. Do you think she has more parasites than most, or do you think this would affect a dry fast?
Um, usually as always, like more information is required. So maybe is she dealing with persistent intestinal issues now, or is it just kind of like bad luck of going to Delhi, India, and Vietnam and just kind of having bad water over and over again? Like I don't know which one it is, but but in the case of like if it's like a persistent, Crohn's, Candida type issue, then yeah, dry fasting would work. Water fasting would work as well to rectify completely. And I'm not sure if, if her issue is kind of like where she's stuck on a certain diet, because that's what I find people do when they have a lot of parasites. They start obeying what their parasites want, or don't react to. So now you're kind of like a slave within your own body. I can only have blueberries and like some melons, but I'm not going to have any breads. I can't have breads, can't have chocolate, like, okay, well, now who's in charge here? So you can obey the parasites for the rest of your life, or you can do something about it. Fasting, or you can do something called phage therapy, which is inoculating your body with competitive bacteria that take out the parasitic bacteria. And I think that's the wave of the future for people who aren't strong-minded enough to do a long fast.
Yeah.
It'll stand with that.
Yeah, she says there no intestinal issues, just eating bad food and back when she ate meat and gross things, she says.
Yeah, so there's a quick fix for that, in my opinion, but it's kind of like a hard thing to do. So anytime I get food poisoning, I'll have like 3 big swigs of just straight up apple cider vinegar, where like it's horrible. You're gonna experience you're inciting a war, because the vinegar and the prebiotics of the apple cider are, going to town, and you're gonna feel kind of weird for the first 10 minutes, and like even it's disturbing. And then you wait, 15 minutes and you do it again. Apple cider vinegar is like the quickest way to overcome food poisoning, naturally, in my opinion. Like I had people who were like, "Hey, should I do a fast right now? I got food poisoning." I'm like, "No, like I'm a fasting guy. I always tell you to do fast, but like apple cider vinegar will rectify, and it does." They're like, "Oh
Mm.
my God, this actually works."
Wow, that's a great tip. Thank you for that. Yeah, I guess on that note, what suggestions would you give, like biggest tips of someone who may not be ready to go into a dry fast and wanting to explore? Because you have a pretty wide range of knowledge when it comes to other healing modalities and things you've tried. So what would be some of your top suggestions that you give besides dry fasting to someone who might want to be trying some other things?
Yeah, I think that everything. So detox is detox. Like everything has to, you know, be accepted by the body. So like everything is a version of it. Even when we eat, it's a version of detox. When we don't eat, it's a version of, so like obviously dry fasting at the deepest level. Um, so I would say to not get lost in the supplementations. Simplicity seems to be the case. Look where I ended up. I had, closets full of supplements, and then to throw them all out only to do nothing was the remedy. Like crazy how it ended up like that, right? But it's like, okay, like give my body what it wants. And if you're plant-based, it's kind of a fun journey. Like, oh, I get to do this for the vitamin B, and I get to do this for the minerals, and I get to do this for the, electrolytes. Um, and then like utilizing like fasting as like a tool, like, tiptoeing on like a juice fast, or then water fast, and then eventually the dry fast. And when people do dry fasting, it's hard to go back to water fasting and juice fasting because it's just so potent. But I'm really obsessed with like, what is anti-parasitic and natural? You got nettle leaf tea, you got the apple cider vinegar, but the apple cider vinegar will kill off the good bacteria too. That's why it works with food poisoning, kills the good and the bad. And then you have things like pine spirits, which will kill off some worms in the liver, and the intestines. And then you have my favorite thing, which is the iodine, which I'm sure you've heard me talk about that before.
Yeah.
But it's obviously the people who live the longest on the planet are existing in these island environments that are eating a bunch of sea vegetation. Sea vegetation is very rich in iodine. Iodine is very anti-parasitic, and it's needed by every cell. Thyroid decalcifies the pineal gland. Scientifically proven to raise your IQ. Why is that? Because it's disseminating, it's dissolving the inflammation in your headspace. So the less inflammation you have, the smarter you get. Hence why you become a genius with dry fasting. You become very spiritually inclined. No inflammation around your brain cavity. Iodine achieves the same thing in your normal life. So you need to have the cofactors, which are in sea moss, ironically, the thing that's usually paired with it. Sea moss gives you 99% of your minerals you need, all the things that let the iodine do its job. So if you take enough iodine, it can get systemically saturated. You call it iodine saturation. If you take too little of it, it'll kind of be localized in your intestinal area and not really get distributed to your headspace or your tissues. Because at the end of the day, that's what fasting and detox is. It's uncovering hiding spots of pathogens that are not serving the body, uncovering hiding spots of energies that are not serving the body, and disrupting their whole thing, the whole home environment. Iodine achieves that outside of fasting.
Awesome. Yeah, it's iodine. Iodine protocols are something that I have sort of barely scratched the surface with, but I do incorporate sea moss on a regular basis, so that is going to have some iodine in it, and as you mentioned, the other minerals, which are great to pair with it. But as far as somebody exploring more into an iodine protocol, I know Lugol's is often regarded as the best form of that if you're going to be supplementing with it. Um, do you have any beginner tips or things to start out with or suggestions to look into?
Yeah, two things. One is a Facebook group called Iodine Protocols. Get into that group and you can search different things that interest you, and all the references will come up. And then there's a book called Iodine Crisis, which kind of really catches you up to speed to why it's beneficial, how it's been deprived from us, because if you look at two things, fluoride has been put into the water, it's purposely calcifying the pineal gland, allowing us to have less access to our spiritual nature, because the pineal gland is notoriously known as the pine cone that allows us to transcend and astral project and all these beautiful things. Produces DMT, dimethyltryptamine, which obviously makes you, witness and see God if you do enough of it. Um, and then you have iodine, which is deprived from us, is taking out of the food sources, and the salt, which it was once in. So now you have fluoride that calcifies the pineal gland, and you have iodine, which is the combatant of it, as we've been deprived of, and that'll decalcify the pineal gland,
Hmm.
allowing us to be anti-inflammatory and decalcified once again.
Great. Awesome. Well, that's the end of my questions. Curious, is there anything else you wanted to touch on that you feel like we didn't get into today, or topics to go deeper into? I mean, I could probably sit here and talk to you all day, but I want to make sure we respect your time, and yeah, is there anything else that came up for you?
Um, yeah, I could definitely talk to you for a while. Sometimes when you're talking, I'm like, oh man, like, am I experiencing a real person right now? That's actually, are you just just are you a mythical figure that do you exist? I think you're a beautiful person. Instead of now, you have a peaceful energy. Um, yeah, I do have a consultation in like 20 minutes, but I was wondering, like, if there's anything that sticks out in your life that has been beneficial to you, energetically, like maybe physically, like what do you kind of like, what's your go-to routine that you find like, okay, this is definitely working solidly. I'm feeling good, hydrating, hair looks great, I feel vital. Like, what would you say like is a beneficial routine for
Well,
you?
yeah, I mean, getting into Orin therapy has definitely been a huge shift when I started adopting that more regularly. So just having that being at least in small quantities a regular part of my day, it's a great way to start the day. Um, I feel like it really helps to hydrate my body and also give the body its method of communicating with itself. You're sending that information back through the loop so it can recalibrate and do whatever it needs to. And then fasting has also been really powerful for me as well. So just going deeper into that in various forms, and, stepping into that a lot more, shifting away from processed foods back in 2020 was huge. And then going deeper into letting go of all alcohol and I still use cannabis sometimes, but all other drugs, I don't do those. Anything plant medicine, I'll use occasionally, but that's been powerful. And then really pairing that with, because it goes hand in hand, but just the spiritual awareness that comes from that, and realizing that the yearning that I have for whether it's information or different beings that I come in contact with, it's not that I'm discovering something new, but it is that familiarity of remembering, So really having that sink in, that I'm not like adding layers to myself. I'm not broken. I'm not putting pieces back together. I'm just kind of like washing myself clean. I'm peeling off the mud or whatever that sort of gunked on me and caking in there. So that's been huge, and that's really what every bit of the conversations that we have. I've been doing podcasts for the past, since about 2020 as well, and all conversations are centered around that. So whether that's physical health, mental, emotional, or spiritual health, everything is all about recalibrating and getting back to our true sense and our true purpose. I often say we're just angels who forgot how to fly. We forgot that we have wings and we forgot that we can fly. So we're just remembering that, we're these angels or angles of light. Light manifests physically, slow down to a certain vibration to where we have the appearance of physicality, so that I can pretend to be me, you can pretend to be you, and we can have a lot of fun discovering and having conversations together. But in reality, it's just all you, I, we having that experience in an infinite number of ways. So yeah, that's been certainly powerful. And going deeper into certain meditation practices, I love learning about ancient traditions. Like I've studied Vipassana from a more Buddhist perspective, and then Kriya Yoga from a Vedic perspective. I think both of those routines are very powerful in their own ways. So I kind of, when I do stuff on my own, I kind of merge those two at times and give and take whatever feels right in whatever way. Um, and yeah, and then just connecting with other beautiful souls like yourself. It's really encouraging to see other people who are like hungry for the truth, ready for something different, ready to, we don't have to demonize the old world or sit there in anger or frustration with it, although it can be tempting at times. But just to see, okay, this was a chapter of this story, and I'm glad that chapter is coming to an end so that we can step into something brighter and better. And the more ways that we can share that message, the better it becomes. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
It's bringing back memories to different parts of myself that I miss, that I would like to incorporate back with my life. So it's been a positive influence to, and an invitation to kind of incorporate these things back into my life. Because people don't really ever forget energy, because when you're feeling like high vibe and like light, and you don't really need anything else. Like if you're just walking down the street and you're feeling like amazing and like you're high energy and you're just doing everything spot on, you're kind of like being hugged by the universe. Like, yes, yes, keep doing this. The meditation and the way you're eating and the fasting, this is all working. The urine therapy, like you just feel freaking good. And
Mhm.
oftentimes when people are sick, they feel lazy and like lethargic and they just can't move. They don't feel motivated. It's the opposite of feeling good.
Yes.
Can't put a price on that.
Yes. It's the inspiration or the inward spiral of that divine influence coming through and moving through us in every which way. So it's powerful in that sense, but we do have to be open to it. That's the choice, is like, am I choosing to stay closed off, to stay pretending that I'm this separated entity that isn't connected to everything around, or am I choosing to be open and have that chalice? That's why Jesus represents that open chalice, because he's there to receive that influence, allow that cup to be filled, but we have to open it in order to receive it.
Very well said. Yeah, that's it. It seems so simple and obvious, but like, I'm not like a woo-woo guy, but I'm like, you got to be open to it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, it's gonna be closed off.
Yeah.
Rightfully so. It's your
Absolutely.
choice. It's
Yeah, yeah, and there's beauty in the contrast as well. We don't really enjoy stories that don't have a contrasting element to it. So I'm very grateful for this dip into hell that we've experienced and gone through the whole layer of darkness and feeling like we're separate and all of that, all so that we could go through the joy and exuberance of breaking the bonds, busting out of the dungeon and saying, I don't want to live like that any longer. I'm ready to step into who I truly am.
I think that if people are, you know, if they're open to like materialism or being bribed, then that's my definition of selling your soul, when you can be bought. So anybody that's in a high power that can be bought, you're compromising the whole.
Yes.
Now we have to pay the consequences to you being cheap. You can be purchased for 20 years worth of wealth before you die. So it's like if you can't be bought, then I can be friends with you. Like and that's
Likewise.
yeah.
Yeah, agreed completely. And that's why Christ says, and we're doing a review series on the Gospel of Thomas, one of the supposed lost books of the Bible. It's very pure teachings of Christ. And but he also says this in the book of Matthew and perhaps the other books as well, where he says you can't serve two masters. If you're not serving one, you're inevitably serving the other. You're either serving God, goodness, or you're serving mammon, which is the physicality. So we can pretend to have feet in both realms, but really if we're still worshiping that physicality, if we're still worshiping money or materialism, then we are not serving God goodness, because we can be bought, we can be swayed, we can be tempted, all of these things. But if you have that full allegiance, and of course it's challenging to maintain completely 100% of the time, but if we're dedicated to always being shifting back to that righteous orientation where I'm serving God goodness, I don't need to worship any physical entity or person, but why don't I worship the kindness itself? Why don't I worship goodness itself? And why don't I let that permeate my whole being and everything within existence? And then that's the shift. That's the shift out of the lower realms and back into the higher again.
Yeah, that's spot on. I think you nailed it. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks, man. Yeah, and I want to say that, if you ever want to come back or talk about any of these topics or go into anything deeper, you're always welcome, my friend. I'm excited for this relationship to continue, and yeah, just to get connected in this way. So I'm just very grateful for your time and attention here.
I appreciate it very much. Yeah, I usually kind of, I mean, I don't intuitively know who to kind of align with, and it was very quick for me to align with you and connect. And yeah, I'm glad that we built this foundation. I got to know you a little bit better, and I'm confident that it'll blossom into something greater.
Absolutely. Yeah, me too. Cool. Well, thanks everyone for being here today. Really appreciate all the questions and comments from the chat. And yeah, if you want to get connected with Trevor, his link tree is listed in the description. You can find ways to contact him, or you can find his Telegram group and his YouTube channel. I've watched every single one of his videos, and I think they're all phenomenal, very informative, and great to hear that perspective. So glad that we could get him here into this space as well. So thank you, brother, for being here again. And yeah, it's such a pleasure, such an honor.
Thanks for having me on, Justin. I appreciate it, brother.
Absolutely. All right, everyone, y'all take care, and we'll see you next time.